All right, I'll kick us off really quickly here. So thanks, Simon. Quick shameless plug, Museum of Contemporary Work is part of the Toronto Design Offsite Festival and running until tomorrow, 4 p.m. At Artscape Young Place. So check that out. And I'll just quickly kick us off here and then hand it over to Nick. Selfishly, this is the first time Nick and I have collaborated together, and this was just a way for me to talk about rituals, which I thought was really cool, and I'm not an academic, so yeah, I think this should be pretty fun. We're going to be talking about employee experience and the role that rituals play. Nick's going to give us a bit of a one-on-one or 101 on ritual, and then a couple examples on the role it plays in the workplace, and then we're going to think a little bit about how we can make sure that we're not losing some of that as we move into an age of remote work and so forth.
Cool.
Over to you.
Thank you.
Go for it, yeah.
So yeah, we're in this spot of work and technology, and I suppose we're sort of coming at it at an interdisciplinary and indirect way, speaking, as Sean said, about employee experience and specifically about rituals, which is what I've studied for the last little while. So, maybe not. Okay, so
Just give me the signal, I can do it.
So I guess the question is, what in the first place, what is a ritual? And I think we all have an understanding when we hear the word, and probably what comes to mind are some of these things, the ancient cultural and religious traditions, the hundreds of, or thousands of years old, or we might think of sports teams or military, and some of us might even think of sort of the world of the esoteric, of satanic rituals and practices. But either way, what is important to point out is that rituals are so much more than what we might initially believe them to be. And so I've been sort of asking myself this question for the better part of 5 or 6 years, and also investigating the underlying psychological and neurobiological basis of these very puzzling and curious human behaviors. So that as a good scientist, we always have to start with an operationalized definition of what ritual is and what ritual isn't. So this is what we think it is. So a predefined behavior is characterized by rigidity, formality, and repetition that are embedded in a larger system of symbolism and meaning, which partially lack direct instrumental purpose. So maybe just an example to drive this home. If you consider the 21-gun salute at a military funeral service, that is to be done in a very specific, prescribed, predefined way. There's no room for improvisation, and if you do it outside of the ritual script, it's seen as an egregious error, and it's not good. So it's highly rigid, and it's also repetitive in that sense. It, of course, belongs to a much broader meaning. When you do that, you tap into a system, into an intention, into a belief. That means much more than just who you are as the person carrying out or the person observing that ritual. And of course, it lacks an instrumental purpose because the actual action of doing the ritual and the desired outcome, which might be, mourning the loss of a fallen comrade or loved one, that link is what we call causally opaque. So rituals fly in the face of basic rational cause and effect, and yet they're hugely important to us. So group rituals and collective rituals are the basis for groups and culture. Social scientists, anthropologists, traditionally, but now psychologists, we've long known about this, and there's empirical evidence to suggest that the groups in our societies that are the most ritualistic are the strongest groups, are the best groups. They're more likely to withstand various forms of economic and social dissolution and collapse, and they're more likely to have this sort of sustained and lasting culture. So the presence of rituals, stronger groups, more culture, better culture, and all these sorts of nice outcomes that we like to see. So then the question now that a lot of organizational theorists and practitioners are asking is, does this hold true even at work? What about in company culture? Do rituals exist? And of course they do, absolutely. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to us because, who makes up work? The workplace is humans. And humans have evolved, we have evolved as a ritual species. And so of course we're bound to see these types of practices, to see these types of behaviors in the workplace. But perhaps we just haven't we haven't seen them in that way. We haven't seen these sorts of behaviors and these practices in that way, but they're they're certainly there. So we'll just walk through a few examples for you. So there's tons of different examples that we can mention, but one is just the gathering around the water cooler. That can be construed as a ritual if you really think about it. And this taps into Sean's work, with the exhibit on the Museum of Contemporary Work, where we have these symbols, we have these tokens and these objects and these artifacts that act as, in the words of Sean, as symbols that are the invisible forces at work and in our work. And so we have these tokens that rituals operate around and work around. Some more examples that we're going to get a little bit more fun as we go along here with the types of rituals that we're talking about. These are probably, again, some more commonplace work rituals that we're all familiar with. The different celebrations for office birthday parties, the Friday drinks, the one-on-one, the informal one-on-ones that we have with colleagues and teammates. And again, we're getting a little more fun here, a little bit more unique. So here we have the wall of shame where people take pictures dressed alike and who look alike on the twinning wall. And then you have the office fridge, which is the perfect place for these sort of ritualistic engagements and practices to occur. They can vary from these very light-hearted jokes to some serious death threats if somebody steals your yogurt or whatever it is. But these are all very highly ritualistic practices. And then here we go, getting to the more unique, the better. So if you're a company or an organization or a team and you have a ritual that is uniquely yours, that is the best example of a ritual because it's representative of your organizations and your team's core values and principles. So this is OXO, and if you walk up into their headquarters in Manhattan, New York, you'll see a big white wall of gloves. And so the employees at OXO are encouraged to pick up lost gloves of New Yorkers on the streets and to bring them into the office and tack them onto that white wall, and with a tag that explains where it was found, the date, and the time. And that is simply to stand as a reminder for all employees of the core principle of OXO, that is the universal design of products fitting comfortably in the hands of all customers. This is an example of idea couture and the onboarding bears. So every new employee will receive a bear like this this says D school, but if your background is in business, it will say B school. And so you get this blank bear, this sort of blank slate, and then you, as the new employee and as the new hire, can make it your own and make it look like whatever you wish. And that stands as a token of who you are as the new employee. And importantly, the key to this practice, to this ritual, is that this bear doesn't stay in your desk or hidden away. It gets put up on the wall with all of these other bears that look very different from your own. And so that's just, again, another reminder of representation that everyone's different, and it's sort of our success lies in our diversity and our different backgrounds and experiences. And this is physical, powerful rituals that exist in even sort of the leading tech and digital companies. So this is Google's AR/VR team. So they gather in kitchens, they'll rent homes, and they'll sort of engage in these eating rituals. And they don't just break bread together, they'll actually bake it from scratch and then have this shared feast together as a team. And probably the best is this at the bottom left, is the disposable underwear to make products and to make services that are pee your pants good. So in the case that you need some backup underwear, they have it there. And I think what I wanted to get across, and hopefully I have, is this notion that rituals embody the physical. Rituals aren't a cognition, they aren't a thought, they don't exist up in our mind or in our brain. They are an outward directed action, and so they do embody the physical in a sense. And so for us and for people thinking about this in terms of the future of work, this perhaps presents a challenge. So what does it mean for rituals? What does it mean for culture as we enter into this age of digitization and rapid change? And so that's what Sean will be picking up in the second half.
And by no means the answer, but hopefully a few suggestions here. So yes, if rituals are about embodying the physical, the future of work is all about digital. You've probably heard a lot about digital transformation over recent years. So how do we reconcile those two things if we know that ritual is core to culture and culture is core to a workplace? So one place that we wanted to really focus in here is the age of remote work. There's plenty of stats out there around remote work growing. We see a lot of positives and a lot of negatives here that we wanted to call out before we offer up a few suggestions. So obviously remote work is great for a few reasons. It really does allow for flexibility. It opens up the labor market to underrepresented groups. It gives people freedom to kind of work around their lifestyle. And it's about efficiency for organizations, so there's cost savings as well. But as far as things that we may be losing, obviously there's some loss of shared physical experience when you're not in the workplace together. There's a loss of team belonging, potentially a loss of psychological safety and trust. So I think these are the things that we're trying to keep in mind as we design some suggestions for what to do. So a couple signals. I mean, IBM, who was a pioneer of remote work, last year called all of its workers back to the office. Very controversial. Thousands of people left. But it's the sort of thing where they obviously saw some of those negatives and decided that they wanted to do something to keep up with the Googles of the world, who do have these beautiful workspaces and workspaces that are designed to promote ritual in certain facets. So the good news is, and correct me if I butcher the research here, there is some research emerging in behavioral science that says that the mere knowledge that a physical experience is being shared is enough for the brain. So you can approximate the physical. So if you're thinking about something like remote work, there are things that we can do. So this is the exercise that Nick and I went through, is we said, okay, let's look to the definition of ritual and let's think about ways that we can break it apart and offer up a few suggestions on how to design ritual for employee experience. So we're going to look at 3 of these. I'll fly through them here and then we'll spend a little bit more time. But the first is interactions and lack of direct work purpose. So that piece around not having some direct commercial purpose. The second is time and repetitive rule-bound behavior. And the third is tokens, those objects that are embedded with meaning. So the first one, I think this one is key in that it has a lot of tension. So obviously a lot of the communication tools that we're designing are all about efficiency. So when you think about ritual and lack of purpose, we almost have to be purposeful in not having a purpose here. So what you're looking at is one example from a SaaS company in the US called FormStack. One thing that they do is an annual pumpkin carving contest in their Indianapolis headquarters. And what they've done now for the last few years is they've had the remote workers act as judges. And this has become a way to include them. You think to Christmas parties, and there's a lot of cool things that some organizations are doing to include their employees in Christmas parties as well. So that first one is being purposeful about lack of purpose. The second one is time and repetitive rule-bound behavior. So I think when people typically think about ritual, it's about something that happens daily, weekly, monthly, annually, and there is some sort of rules around it, and it's very formal in the behaviors that you're taking. So trivia night is a good example of the sort of thing that many organizations do, but it tends to be in a physical space. Any fans of HQ in here? Anybody? I see some soft clapping. I see some hands. Without spending too much time on it, HQ is the craze in the Valley right now. It's an online live trivia game that goes on at 12 and 6 Pacific, and has blown up. And recent valuations I've seen are like hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's a few months old. So an organization could have done this digital version of a trivia night very easily. It could have been a FedEx HQ trivia night, and that would be a way to ritualize this event that happens physically all the time. Finally, tokens and embedded meaning. So how can we actually have objects that are enjoyed together in different places? Why can't we ship something like coffee and ritualize a coffee break that exists on a daily basis or once a week, where there's a strict rule about not talking about work, and this branded coffee is meant to be made and enjoyed together by each of the employees. And again, you're kind of working against that remote space, that proximity that employees are not sharing together. So those are 3 suggestions. Nick will just quickly wrap it up here, and then We'll take some questions at the end if we've blown through too quickly here.
So I guess the question is, so what do we do with this? Now that we know we can go, like this is ritual and we can look out for them, you know, in our workplace environment. So the first is to practice what we're calling ritual spotting. They are everywhere, and so maybe just having the idea in your mind that they are is the first thing that you need to go out and sort of find them as they exist out there. And recognize the organic one-off interactions that have the potential to become rituals and to ritualize those engagements and those interactions with people and with teams. And also notice, of course, as we said, that they're at risk due to the digitization of the workplace and the way that things are going with our organizations and our places of work. And to, as Sean said, with the three considerations, augment existing practices for digitization, and to use those things to our advantage and to really capture them nicely in that way. So again, it's the interactions with a lack of direct work purpose, time and repetitive behaviors, and these tokens and the embedded meaning. So yeah, well, that's it.